Hey everyone, it's Mary Brownlee, licensed professional counselor and trauma therapist. Today we're going to go over 10 lesser known symptoms of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. CPTSD, for any of you who might be unfamiliar, is related to lots of layers of childhood abuse and neglect. So not just single incident trauma, but multiple layers of relationship trauma. So yeah, I remember back in the day when I was healing my own case of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, that what really helped me most was hearing other people's stories, especially those who had similar stories to mine, recognizing that I wasn't so very different from them. It reduced a lot of my shame and self-blame that I carried. So that's kind of the purpose for this video. It's just kind of some real talk, trauma survivor to trauma survivor, about what's normal considering a lot of our abusive and traumatic experiences, where a lot of these kind of wounded parts and these difficult feelings and emotions and behaviors come from, and also to give us hope that there are answers and that we can heal some of these very distressing symptoms. So I hope you will find this video helpful. Below, I'll link some other very helpful videos on complex post-traumatic stress disorder, so feel free to look for those in the description below. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, the first lesser known symptom that I'm going to talk about is difficulty with identity. Basically, this is the question of who am I as a person? And complex trauma really does a number on this particular aspect of who we are. So, and the reason for that is parents were not healthy mirrors. And what I mean by that is a child first gets a sense of who they are as a person based on how the parent interacts with the young child. So if parents are neglectful or abusive in any way, shape, or form on a regular basis, a child's going to learn very different messages about who they are as a person. And oftentimes these messages are based in fear of the parent, fear of the world, feelings of shame and inadequacy. So yeah, when parents are not healthy, loving, nurturing adults on a regular basis, children are not going to form a strong sense at least, of who they are, because parents really lay in that foundation for the child of identity and self-worth, and a sense of being safe in the world and a sense of understanding other people. So this is really where it goes wrong when children have lots of trauma in childhood. Parents didn't allow for exploration. So that's something else that commonly happens in children who have lots of ACEs, those high ACE scores, for example. Parents weren't encouraging of their children having interests and maybe passionate about certain hobbies, or maybe they love school, or maybe they love sports. So parents just really weren't emotionally tuned into their children's world. So a lot of times children just didn't get a chance to discover who they were as a person either. So that also will impact identity. They also sometimes are pigeonholed into what the parent wants the child to do. So I see this also, this is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where almost like the parent is so controlling and so micromanaging that the child is forced into an interest or a hobby that only the parent really likes, but it's not really what the child wants to do. Excuse me. So the child doesn't really get a sense of being able to explore and find out who they are as a person and what they like. Instead, they're forced to just really take on the identity and the interests of the parent and what the parent says that the child should be. So that's also going to negatively impact identity. And then also, sometimes there's role reversals that happen as well, where the parent, for example, because of their own unmet childhood needs and their own trauma as a child, they expect the child to take care of them. So we call that a role reversal or parentification. So the parent essentially expects the child to take care of the parent's emotional needs, sometimes the parent's basic needs even. And so the child literally grows up as like a mini adult from a very young age, expected to take care of the parent's needs. So that also, as you can imagine, does not really improve or allow for the formation of a healthy identity. And then also just essentially longstanding patterns of abuse and neglect as well, just really lay this foundation for life being kind of like in a state of fight or flight all the time. And so if a child's really only concerned with survival, then you're not really going to be able to focus on your own needs and your own identity development. You're too busy just trying to get through every single day. So, yeah, these are kind of some of the things that complex trauma in childhood can do to damage a child's ability to form a healthy sense of identity and self worth. All right. The second is low self worth and feeling unworthy. This is probably the most common wound that I see when I work with clients, and the common wound that I also struggled with as a complex trauma survivor is just deep feelings of shame and unworthiness and self hatred. And this really comes from like a parent who is highly critical. Again, no encouragement, no praise, just lots of criticism or lots of verbal abuse, lots of put downs. Um, Also shame, a parent who shames the child liberally, who essentially the child can do nothing right, or even like emotional neglect, where a parent just zero interactions with the child. It's like the child's invisible to the parent. That can also create a sense of low self worth and shame and feeling invisible. So all of that, low to no positive parenting strategies being used, like encouragement and praise and reflecting back to the child the strengths that you see that the child has and giving them hugs and warmth on a regular basis. That all helps to foster not only that healthy identity we were talking about, but also self worth as well. And so parents who are abusive or neglectful don't do these type of healthy parenting strategies. So kids will really grow up with this deep sense of woundedness and self-hatred and lacking that identity. And what I like to say is, that the parent's critical voice basically children internalize. And then as adults now, they're talking to themselves in the same voice that the parent used. So yeah, that's kind of the biggest fallout is that criticizer part, so to speak, becomes, it's the parent's internalized voice. So we could be an adult and mom or dad could be dead, or maybe we've moved away or gone no contact or whatever. But here, mom and dad's inner voice, is essentially how we talk to ourselves all day long. So that's a big wound that many people with complex trauma struggle with, and we work to overcome in therapy as well. Number three is problems trusting other people. This is a big one. I see this repeatedly with a lot of my clients, and I can relate to this one as well. Again, parents, because of their longstanding problematic behaviors, created what we call insecure attachment in the children. And so that's where there's a lack of trust between child and parent. So the child has learned mom or dad are not going to meet my needs, and mom and dad are scary, or mom or dad are neglectful and I'm invisible to them. So essentially, the child has learned from a very young age that I'm not going to get my needs met, that I'm fundamentally an unlovable, unworthy person. And that causes a lot of damage to a developing human being. And it's going to cause them to have distrust of other people, right? Our parents are really that first kind of experience we have with other people. And essentially, whether or not parents realize it, when you have a baby and a toddler and like a 4, 5, 6 year old growing up, how you treat them is really laying down the foundation of how they figure out their place in the world and whether people are trustworthy, whether people are safe, whether they're a good person or not. Kids aren't fundamentally thinking of these things in the way that we understand them as adults, but it's felt. It's a felt sense of who they are. And so that insecure attachment, where a parent has not met the child's basic needs or emotional needs or social needs or psychological needs, that's going to create a sense of fear in the child and a sense of distrust in other people and even in themselves as well. So, yeah, children learn that the world is an unsafe place, that people are fundamentally untrustworthy, and that they're going to have to kind of rely on themselves to get their needs met. And also, it lays in the foundation for hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is one of those PTSD symptoms in complex PTSD of constantly being in a state of fight or flight, the world was an unsafe place as you were growing up. So yeah, you bet you're going to have some hypervigilance on a regular basis as well. And this also contributes to feeling on edge around other people and waiting for the shoe to drop, so to speak, and waiting for other people to harm you. All right, the next one is avoidance of emotions. All right. So, oftentimes, what's very, very common in childhoods like this is that kids learn that emotions would be punished or ignored. Sometimes both, depends on the parent, right? No one modeled healthy emotional expression in our families of origin as well. So kids really don't know the healthy place for emotions and emotional expression. If mom or dad were raging and screaming all the time, kids learn that the main emotional expression is through high degree of rage and anger. If parents were completely emotionally neglectful and shut down, children learn that emotions are not to be expressed and that they must keep them to themselves. So, yeah, there's a lot of avoidance of emotions to maintain emotional equilibrium or like safety, a sense of safety and balance. There's also a low emotional intelligence, like even being able to describe how we feel as survivors is challenging in the beginning. We know that we don't feel good, but that kind of layered, nuanced emotional verbiage, so to speak, of being able to understand our inner world, that's lacking in a lot of trauma survivors. Yeah, they may know that they're sad, but they don't know maybe the layers of sadness like despair or a deep sense of loneliness or feeling unworthy or a feeling of scarcity and feeling invisible. And so there's like layers to our emotional expression. Emotion wheels are great for giving you kind of tons and tons and tons of different words to describe, say, anger or sadness or something like that. You'll see layers of different words to describe the same emotion. So, yeah, that type of emotional intelligence is lacking in trauma survivors because, again, our parents were not showing us and describing to us when we were little kids our emotions and helping us work through difficult emotions. So, yeah, we struggle with like emotion regulation, distress tolerance. That's very common as well in trauma survivors. So, and there's also negative messages related to emotions as well. For example, if a parent raged and screamed but didn't allow the child to express anger or rage, then yeah, the child grows up feeling like, well, I'm not allowed to express anger. Mom or dad could, but I'm not allowed. And boom, they internalize all of those negative emotions. And guess what it comes out as? Depression. Massive, massive depression. So, yeah, a lot of those earliest messages around how mom and dad express emotions, we internalize as adults as well. And it changes our ability to have a healthy emotional inner world and to express healthy emotions as well as an adult. The next is getting overwhelmed easily. And as you can imagine, this kind of relates to emotional expression as well. Um, The nervous system was frequently overstressed as a child. Again, lots of fear going on in abusive childhoods. So our nervous system is really always out of balance and in a state of fight or flight. No one modeled problem solving or healthy communication. There was low encouragement. And if you got overwhelmed as a child and maybe had some emotional expression, you were either like punished or ignored. Negative messages related to like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and I'll give you something to cry about and go to your room if you're going to act like that. I don't want to hear you crying. So that really contributed to a child not being able to self-soothe very well, and a lot of shame around emotions as well. So that contributes to overwhelm. So when we feel an emotion as a trauma survivor, we don't have any healthy way to express it or talk about it. So boom, the overwhelm kind of spills over the top and causes lots of problems as an adult. This can lead us to like giving up easily, not pushing ourselves through any sort of difficulty. Things like disassociation, distraction is common. So, yeah, we'll develop those kind of protective parts to manage overwhelm and distressing emotions that I've talked about in a lot of my other IFS videos. Another thing that's common is chronic pain, chronic tension. Again, in a state of fight or flight for most of our childhood, it's going to lead to a lot of problems with our bodies, whether it's our digestive systems like IBS or chronic muscle tension from, constantly being prepared to have to like fight back or run away from the dangers of the childhood. So, yeah, that chronic pain, I have a lot of chronic pain the people that I work with that, again, very traumatic childhoods. I just see it all the time, unfortunately. Our nervous system is constantly under stress. Again, that builds up over time with stress hormones, things like adrenaline and cortisols running through the body at a high degree. And that can break down the body over time as well and lead to some of these physical health conditions, sadly. And our bodies become highly reactive to stress as well. So any new additional stress in our adult lives can collapse the body as well. So it's, again, those layers. Sometimes we can put up with so many layers up to a certain point, and then boom, we'll have a straw that breaks the camel's back moment, and the body will just flood over, and you'll experience maybe a collapse in your physical health as well. So I've seen a lot of these different scenarios as a trauma therapist and experienced them myself too. Feeling alone in the world. Ooh, so this relates to, again, that neglect and abuse is going to cause a child to realize, I can only rely on myself. I can't rely on other people. Uh, we learned we couldn't talk to anybody, so we internalized all our distress. We kept it to ourselves. We found it hard to relate to other people, especially other people who seem to have like healthy, loving childhoods. So that only further led to a sense of isolation and keeping things to ourselves. And there's also a deep sense of sadness and grief that we carry with us as trauma survivors. And that's really hard to just carry on a regular basis, right? It's heavy. It's heavy. It's sad. And so, again, a lot of trauma survivors are walking around with this deep sense of feeling different and feeling unloved and unworthy and a sense of loneliness and lack and scarcity, but they're not telling anybody, right? We learned we couldn't talk about our feelings, we couldn't talk about our distress, and that we could only rely on ourselves. So all of that we kept inside. So that's going to also very much contribute to a sense of feeling alone in the world. Feeling that no one understands you. This is very similar to kind of feeling alone in the world. Again, a lot of us do not realize how common childhood abuse and neglect is. Sadly, I'll get to that in a minute. And so we walk around until we see a trauma therapist. We're walking around feeling so completely different and so alone in the world that it contributes to a feeling that no one will understand me. No one cannot understand what I've been through. And, no one really talks about childhood abuse, at least not here in the United States. Maybe some other countries have done a better job at this. But in the United States, it's really stigmatized still on some level. And it leads to a sense that we're different from others. And it also silences abuse victims. There's a lot of victim blaming in the US as well. So a lot of survivors just keep their stories to themselves. And so they don't reach out for help and they don't talk to other people. And so they will walk around with this deep sense of feeling different from other people. Sadly, as I mentioned, childhood abuse and neglect is far more common than we think it is. And I didn't recognize just how common it was either until I became a therapist and went into the trauma field. I've been here for 9 years, worked with thousands of people at this point, and it is so incredibly common. So there's a good chance that actually people in your life probably know exactly what you're talking about. They're just not opening up and telling anybody for the same exact reasons that you're not. The CDC has said that at least 1 in 7 kids experience childhood abuse or neglect every single year, and that this is an underestimate because many cases go unreported. So maybe it's more like 1 in 5, if I had to guess, like 20% probably of all people in the United States have significant adverse childhood experiences. Again, that layer of childhood abuse and neglect. That's outrageous. It's astronomical, and it shouldn't be happening in today's day and age. But yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone. Unfortunately, I wish it was different, but there's going to be many people out in the world that totally understand what it's like to grow up feeling unloved and unworthy and to live in a constant state of fear or chaos, or to feel completely invisible and not worthy. So yeah, you're not alone. Okay. So this is kind of why I'm putting out this video too, to really show all abuse and trauma survivors that there's so many of us out there, and we are all deserving of love and care and safety. And I'm shedding light on this so that you too can kind of release some of that shame and that sense of being different and unlovable, because sadly, this is far more common than it should be, and you're not alone. And the next one is control freak issues. So, what do I mean by that? So, if you're a trauma survivor, you probably have difficulty with change. That probably causes lots of anxiety. Those of us who dealt with a lot of chaos and dysfunction and instability in our home life, we tend to really like our alone time. We like things to kind of be the same from day to day. We like to know if we can predict kind of what will happen day to day, right? We don't like change or chaos or unpredictability. That can really throw our nervous system for a loop. And that makes sense, right? Because if we're really in a state of fight or flight and our nervous system was highly activated a lot as a child, sameness and stability and almost like boring day-to-day stability, that represents safety to our nervous systems. So that's why a lot of us can be a little bit of a control freak sometimes, where we get overly anxious if things happen that we weren't expecting. We can possibly become like over controlling in certain areas of our life, whether it's like micromanaging at work, or maybe we have parts that developed like a super restrictive eating habits, or maybe a little OCD tendencies, and things have to be just so and ordered just right. So yeah, that's kind of another common symptom that trauma survivors have, is just really disliking change and liking things to be the same day to day. And yeah, we can be a bit of a control freak. All right, the last one is so me. This is so me. And again, that avoidant attachment style stemming from insecure attachment uh, totally underlies a lot of CPTSD, where again, you learn that your parent was not a reliable person to rely on for things like love and nurturing and safety and emotional support. So you just kept all your feelings to yourself and your suffering, and you just became overly self-reliant. And so that leads us to be super, super independent and not asking for help, right? So we develop these overly independent parts that are like, no, 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 don't rely on other people. That's not safe. We could get really harmed, or this person could let us down, or that's terrifying. That's terrifying to have a need for other people. So we stuff it down deep down inside, and we just, again, become overly independent and overly self-reliant. So yeah, also, parents contributed to this by like punishing us if there was any perceived weakness. You know, the parent definitely usually taught us that emotions, and especially the more vulnerable ones like sadness or loneliness or having needs for like connection, were weak and stupid and wrong. So yeah, we learned to stuff our own natural, healthy needs for connection and safety and attachment. And, you know, we learned other people were dangerous. If mom or dad were highly volatile and you were walking on eggshells all the time, you bet that you learned very quickly to avoid setting mom or dad off. So, all of these things contributed to a lot of us just becoming overly self-reliant, and that was kind of the only way we could stay safe reliably. So our job as trauma survivors is to unlearn a lot of these negative messages that we were taught and begin to nurture kind of authentic true self. And how we do that is through IFS. That's my favorite method. I have lots of videos on IFS throughout my channel. Feel free to check some of them out. I'll link a couple of the main big ones below as well. But I want to first and foremost just give every trauma survivor out there a little bit of hope that yes, you can get better. Yes, you can heal. I'm living proof of that. Yes, you can begin to feel safe again with other people, and to love yourself deeply, and to have a new sense of purpose and meaning. All of this is very, very possible. So I encourage all of you, if you have a good trauma therapist in your area, that's going to be your first kind of step here to healing, is get in with a good trauma therapist. Definitely educate yourself, so that it takes the stigma out of all of the symptoms and all of the distress, and you realize just how normal you are, and that your reactions to trauma and abuse are completely normal given the circumstances. As we say with PTSD, it's the system, the body system's natural response to very abnormal experiences. So all of our bodies were primed to keep us safe. And that's really what complex PTSD is that the body has developed a set of strategies to keep us safe and help us survive. So I don't want you carrying shame. I don't want you to carry a sense of unworthiness. Your body, your heart, your mind kept you safe and allowed you to survive. And here you are today. So I want you to know that you are deeply worthy, deeply lovable. You may not feel it just yet, but I know you can get there. So stay with me. Please like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. And I'm here to answer any of your questions. So feel free to drop any comments below. And I just want you to know that I care deeply about each and every one of you. You can do this. You can get through this, and I'm here to help you. Take care, everybody, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.